Portugal is still sold as Europe's affordable paradise. Ocean sunsets, safe streets, a laid-back life where a normal salary buys you normal things. But that story is collapsing in real time. In Lisbon, asking rents have reached around 22 euros per square meter. That means a modest 60 square meter apartment can cost roughly 1,300 euros a month, before bills, before groceries, before transport. And if you try to buy instead, prices in Lisbon vary depending on the measure used. Listing prices in central areas often exceed 6,000 euros per square meter, while transaction averages for the municipality remain lower. Even using conservative figures, a 60 square meter apartment can still easily cost 300,000 euros or more. Now put that next to Portuguese pay. In 2025, total gross monthly earnings averaged about 1,740 euros, while regular monthly earnings were closer to 1,370 euros. And more than half of workers still earn under 1,000 euros a month. So for a huge share of the country, Lisbon living isn't expensive. It's mathematically impossible. And it's not only Lisbon. Portugal's house prices have more than doubled since 2010, up roughly 140% over that period. Meanwhile, the minimum wage in 2025 was 870 euros. If your rent sits between 900 and 1,200 euros, your paycheck stops feeling like income and starts feeling like a transfer from employer to landlord. This isn't just a housing story. It's a system story. Because once housing breaks, everything else strains with it. Family formation, local businesses, public services, even the country's future workforce. You increasingly hear reports of full-time workers renting shared rooms, young adults delaying children, nurses and teachers commuting long distances, and neighborhoods where long-term residents are replaced by short-term visitors. And Portugal has one more accelerant pouring on the fire: tourism. Tourism is no longer just a seasonal bonus. In 2024, tourism-related consumption represented roughly 16% of economic activity under Portugal's tourism satellite accounting. The sector's total direct and indirect contribution is commonly estimated at around 12% of GDP. Either way, a large share of growth is increasingly tied to visitors and outside spending, not the people who actually live there. So, how did Portugal go from cheap and charming to unlivable for locals? And why do the policies meant to fix it often arrive late or work slowly? This is why living in Portugal has become impossible. Walk through the center and you feel it. Cafes full, suitcases rolling over cobblestones, new boutique hotels where neighborhood shops once stood. The city looks richer. But for residents, that richness often arrives as higher rent, higher prices, and landlords unwilling to renew leases because short stays can bring higher returns. And when housing becomes the bottleneck, every other dream gets throttled. The question isn't comfort anymore, it's survival math. And to understand why, start with the basic incentive problem. If you own an apartment in a beautiful global city, you have two markets: locals who pay monthly and outsiders who pay per night. When short-term rental demand is strong, the math changes. A landlord doesn't have to be malicious. They just have to be rational. In high-demand periods, short-term rentals can sometimes generate in a week what a long lease produces in a month, even after fees and seasonal fluctuations. That logic doesn't just push rents up, it can also remove homes from the long-term market entirely, shrinking supply for residents who can't bid with vacation money. And once that happens at scale, a city starts behaving less like a community and more like a hotel lobby. Lisbon has tried to contain this with containment areas and restrictions on new short-term rental licenses in pressured districts, following national legislation that gave municipalities stronger control. But measures like that often arrive after pressure has already built, after investors bought properties, and after many families had already moved away. Then comes the second driver: outside capital. Portugal spent a decade advertising itself as a destination for international buyers, remote workers, and high-net-worth residents. Even when programs change on paper, market momentum doesn't instantly reverse. Real estate moves slowly, expectations remain sticky. And property increasingly becomes a financial product, a place to park money, not necessarily build a life. Add the third driver, wages that simply can't catch up. Portugal remains one of Western Europe's lower-wage economies. When housing behaves like a global asset, but wages grow like a local economy, the gap widens. A raise of 5% means little against rent increases that can absorb a year's salary growth in one renewal. For many workers, one contract update wipes out months of progress. And in the background, the cost of living hit households at the worst possible time. Inflation surged to double digits in 2022. Even after inflation cooled, prices didn't fall back, they simply rose more slowly. Households ended up paying more for housing and more for basics at the same time. This is the trap. Housing costs rise first, then essentials, then public services weaken because workers who keep them running struggle to afford the cities they serve. And once that happens, the next part becomes visible. People leave. You can see the collateral damage in small changes: neighborhood shops replaced by souvenir stores, neighbors replaced by key boxes, and many households facing housing costs that consume more than 40% of disposable income just to stay near work. Portugal has always had emigration in its history, but today it often reflects economic pressure rather than adventure. Not "I want to explore, but I can't build a future here." OECD data shows emigration of Portuguese citizens to OECD countries reached about 61,000 in 2023, up around 4% in a single year. That isn't just lifestyle mobility. It reflects mounting pressure. And notice who tends to go first: young, mobile, educated workers, the very people you need to keep a country productive. When they leave, the economy doesn't just lose taxpayers. It loses nurses, engineers, technicians, teachers, entrepreneurs, the people who run hospitals, maintain infrastructure, start companies, and raise the next generation. Now, connect it back to housing. If Lisbon prices are increasingly shaped by global demand, then Lisbon wages stop being the benchmark. The comparison becomes Berlin, London, New York, because that's where the next buyer or renter compares from. And a Portuguese salary simply can't compete with that. So coping strategies emerge. Live with roommates into your 30s. Move far from work and trade money for hours. Turn family homes into multi-generation housing. Or leave the country. But here's the twist. Even policies designed to attract better money can backfire. Portugal's famous tax incentives changed, with the old non-habitual resident regime ending for most new entrants in 2024 and replaced by narrower programs targeting specific activities. The Golden Visa route based on real estate investment was also closed to new applicants. On paper, that looks like the country listened. In practice, markets don't unwind just because politicians update a brochure. Prices are already baked in. Investors already made their bets. Tourism demand remains strong. In high-demand neighborhoods, scarcity keeps doing what scarcity does. Meanwhile, local politics gets trapped between two voters: residents who need cheaper housing now, owners whose wealth depends on prices staying high. So reforms become cautious, delayed, or diluted. Each year of delay hardens the new reality: Portugal as a place where locals serve the economy but increasingly struggle to live in its most dynamic cities. And once the outflow begins, it changes how people plan their lives. Why start a business if your lease can jump next renewal? Why have children if housing feels unstable? That creates the final feedback loop. The more unaffordable a city becomes, the more it depends on the industries that helped make it expensive. If such a large share of economic activity is tied to tourism, the country becomes vulnerable, not only economically, but politically. Visitor infrastructure, hotels, flights, experiences becomes a priority, while resident affordability becomes harder to fix quickly. This is why the crisis feels so discouraging on the ground. You can't outsave a market priced by global money. You can't work harder against rent shaped by seasonal tourism and investor expectations. And you can't build stability on wages that lag behind shelter costs. So what would actually change the trajectory? First, supply where people live, not luxury units marketed abroad, but long-term housing where jobs exist. faster permits, better infrastructure, and incentives for build-to-rent housing that stays in the long-term market. Second, rules that align housing with housing, meaning homes primarily for residents. If short-term rentals exist, cap them by neighborhood, enforce licensing, and make long-term renting financially competitive again. Third, wages and productivity. Portugal can't solve this with housing policy alone if typical incomes remain far below the cost of living in flagship cities. That means building value beyond tourism, export industries, technology sectors, and public services capable of retaining staff. But here's the uncomfortable truth. None of this is quick. And until it happens, Portugal becomes a split-screen country. One Portugal is for visitors, temporary, curated, profitable. The other is for residents, permanent, squeezed, and increasingly mobile. If you live there, you feel it every month when rent is due. If you're thinking of moving there, you discover it the moment you try to sign a lease. And if you're watching from elsewhere, don't dismiss this as a uniquely Portuguese problem. Because Portugal isn't an exception. It's a preview of what happens when countries are marketed like products, homes become assets, and wages fall behind the cost of shelter.